Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. uh, Thank you again, everyone, for joining today. My name is Francheska Jimenez. I'm an Assistant Director of Academic and Student Affairs at the Center for Data Science. And this is our PhD in Data Science Admissions Information session. So just some guidelines for today's session. All attendees are muted during the event, but you can submit questions through the Q&A box. So feel free to submit any questions throughout the session there. And you also have the option to upvote any relevant questions that you would like to ensure are answered. And the session is being recorded, so we will share the recording out within the next week or so, so that information will be available to you at that point. We do have an agenda for today. So we're starting off with a welcome from our Director of Graduate Studies for the PhD program, Cristina Savin, and then we're doing an overview of the PhD program and curriculum, a short Q&A with Cristina, a round of lightning talks, and then an overview of the medical school track, as well as a Q&A as well. And then another round of lightning talks. And finally, we will end with admissions and application reminders. So if you have any questions that are specific to the application process itself, we will make sure to cover a lot of information in that section and also answer any questions live as well. Okay, so I will pass it over to Cristina.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're very happy to have you on board. So my mission here is pretty short. I'm just going to tell you a very brief set of facts about the Center for Data Science in general at NYU and the PhD program specifically. And then hopefully we can move relatively quickly to the interesting bits, like having a sense of what kind of science we're doing here at NYU, and then the nitty-gritty of how you apply. Okay, so let's get going. So the first question that I get asked all the time is, okay, how is a data science different from, say, a math or a CS PhD program? And my answer is that while we also do like methodological machine learning tool development, data science really lies at the intersection between these tools and applications in real data domains. And the way the center has been formed from the very beginning in 2013 is to have faculty affiliated across multiple departments such that we really foster this intersection. And we need a click for the science happens. Yes, thank you. So the faculty are co-affiliated with different departments at NYU, and this sort of like fosters by construction collaboration and the bridge between methodology and domain applications. So myself, I'm a professor in neuroscience and data science, but we have across our many faculty people covering a wide range of domains from like biology, psychology. The medical track you're going to hear a lot about later in the schedule, natural language processing linguistics, music, also responsible data science and ethics. Ours was one of the first programs to put all of these interesting intersections in a physical space together. Ever since, we've been building our opportunities to do interesting data science at NYU by sort of like first starting with the master's program, then the PhD program, and now we also have an undergraduate in data science as well. So maybe let's go to a little bit of how the program works. The program has been originally funded by federal NRT training grant, and it supports science across both methodology and applications. When you apply, you'll see like you can select among several application areas, so like core tool machine learning, science and applications, theory, data engineering, responsible data science, and the medical track. Next. In terms of curriculum, this combines a substantial amount of coursework and work in like research rotations with your PhD advisor. So you get the collection of mandatory courses that make sure that everybody has strong foundations in the methodology of data science. And then a number of electives that allow you to specialize for your specific research domain. Yes, and there are several steps like that you need to pass through the program that you'll probably want to hear more about once like much later down the road, once you start into the PhD program. Okay, so let's go next to the lightning talks. So the way we structured this information session is like we wanted to bring a few people from the actual department for you guys to get a sense of the kind of research that we do here. And in particular, we brought a couple of students so they can tell you a little bit about their experience, like coming into the programming, being PhDs at NYU. So we'll start with Michael, who...
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Michael. Let me stop sharing on my end.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm a fourth-year PhD student here at the Center for Data Science, and I work with my wonderful advisors, Tal Linzen and Kyung-Hun Cho. And I would say my approach to my work is generally as like a computational cognitive scientist working on natural language processing. So the focus of my work over the last couple of years, and then most likely going forward, has been how do learning dynamics, the ways in which neural networks learn, can we develop empirical understanding of that? And then how can we use that empirical understanding to improve our training of current day language models? So like we have some like general understanding of how kids develop, and so much so that we have all of these theories that have been, formalized over the past 100, 200 years from Jean Piaget and Sigmund Freud, sort of categorizing the stages in which kids develop, and setting aside even those formal theories, we also have like an understanding ourselves of how, kids grow up. And broadly speaking, that is what I'm trying to achieve with my work. I want to understand how like a language model changes when you have like an untrained language model, how that language model develops from that untrained state into a language model that you can chat with, and then apply it towards better algorithms or more efficient algorithms for creating new language models. So I'll give you like an example of this particular process. So this is one of the papers that I worked on last year called Between Circuits and Chomsky, Pre-Training on Formal Languages Imparts Linguistic Biases. So if you know a little bit about language models, you might know that there's this multi-stage process of training language models nowadays. And one of the most important stages is pre-training, where you train the language model on a data set that approximates the size of the entire internet. And what we were arguing is that, that large piece of training is good and fine, and we want to keep that. But there are also elements of language that linguists have like formalized over the years. So in particular, we have theories of like language has a particular structure in that there is like a syntax, and we can like parse a sentence into its like constituent roles and parts. So our insight was we're going to create synthetic data that is really good at teaching or at approximating the formal aspects of language. And then before we start pre-training, we're going to train on this easy to learn synthetic language first. And we actually showed that if you train on this easy to learn synthetic data, it actually improves the training efficiency of pre-training. So that's one example of like the flavor of my work and my dual mandate of like trying to understand neural networks and trying to apply them or apply this understanding to improving neural networks. So I'm currently working with the Allen AI team in Seattle. They create like a series of open source language models, and we're trying to apply pre-training to improve the efficiency of this language model's training. And then outside of my work, I also work on the Baby LM Challenge, which is this community-wide challenge to train language models with only 100 million words of pre-training data, which is roughly equivalent to the amount that a human would see. So the goal of this is to converge the modeling of how humans learn and efficient language modeling. So in general, my work is something like machine developmental psychology, but from first principles. I'm trying to understand the machines without necessarily making strong analogies to how humans learn, but certainly inspired by the work that we've done over the past, say, 200 years in the psychological field. And I've had the blessing of working with many Center for Data Science faculty. I'm actually currently working on a project with Pratyusha, who you'll hear from next. And onto some things that I love about CDS. Well, first, like as Cristina alluded to, it's a very collaborative and interdisciplinary department, which is awesome. Like all the wonderful people that I've gotten to work with. And one counterintuitive thing is honestly the amount that I've like saved, or like the amount that I've saved in like living the quality of life that I do in New York. Here, I think the food is generally cheaper than some of the cities that I've lived in. So I was living in Seattle over the summer, and the food was very expensive for whatever reason. And also, I don't pay much in transportation costs. So in terms of like being able to get to places and like live an exciting life without having a car, I think that's also awesome. So I think in general, if you're used to living in big cities, excited about living in New York, excited about living in a global city, then I think this program is also a good fit for all the things that you're going to do outside of work as well. Okay, that's all from me.
Thank you, Michael. Let's see here if there are any questions for you. Not seeing any at the moment. Okay, so then we will pass it over to Pratyusha. Thank you so much. Are you able to share screen? Okay, perfect.
All right, so hello everyone. I'm very excited to be here, and thanks Michael for such a nice talk. So today I'm going to be talking a bit about some of my previous work and questions I've been excited to think about going forward. And most of my work has focused on developing experimental methods and machine learning algorithms that will help us both discover and engineer the computation underlying these very large intelligent systems. And this could include both biological organisms as well as AI systems. Now, to kind of motivate that a little bit, let's look at this, maybe graphic, right? So across the tree of life, if you start with the simplest to the most complex organism, every organism can sense their environment and can act to cause changes to it. Now, clearly, some animals on the spectrum exhibit more sophisticated behaviors than others. And there's this question of like, where does the difference even lie, right? Is it in scale? Yes, as we go from left to right, these animal systems become multicellular and have very complex nervous systems. But also importantly, the differences lie in structure. So for example, one thing to note is that whales might have more neurons than humans do, and C. elegans has 250 times more neurons per unit body mass than humans. So however you measure scale, it's necessary, but by itself, it is insufficient. Now, let's also add two engineered systems to this spectrum. Robotic systems that can perceive and act in this world, and language models that have language as both the input and output. Now, at the end of the day, as engineers, we want to be able to build complex systems that can exhibit behaviors like humans or like other animal systems. And there's this topical question of what do we even build in? Is it scale? Is it structure? What is it? Now, if you look at this slightly differently, all of these systems, both biological and artificial, they lie somewhere along these two axes of scale and structure. Now, in computer science and in biology, there are two schools of thought. The first school believes that what you need are these inductive biases that capture the essence of the domains that all of these systems operate in. And the more specialized structure you build in, the more kinds of intelligent behaviors will emerge. Now, the second school of thought, the scale school, believes that by taking simple ideas, building simple models, adding in more parameters, and throwing in more data, these models will learn everything necessary through stochastic gradient descent. And there's a very popular hypothesis for this by Rich Sutton, where he suggests that simple models trained at scale outperform boutique specialized systems. But the question really is, at what scale and for what kinds of structures? Because at the end of the day, if you have to build a Earth-sized computer in order for human-like intelligence to emerge, then it's kind of not even tractable. So to get to an answer to this question, I look at existing intelligent agents, understand their computation underpinnings, and use these insights to build better AI systems. Now, a part of the structure in human cognition comes from language. Language is a communicative tool, but importantly, it's also a cognitive tool, with Chomsky even very controversially saying how 99% of why language exists and came into being is to kind of enable this internal computation in our brains, and only 1% of it is external. It also interacts with other components in our brain, structures our thought, reasoning, and enables a range of intelligent behaviors. So it's language and language-like structures that I find most interesting: compositional, hierarchical, productive. So the structures that I'll be talking a bit about today will be those induced by language, natural or not, in how they connect to different external behaviors that some of these systems exhibit. So a part of my research looks at understanding some of these large, complex systems, and the other on how we can use what we've learned to build better AI systems. And one running theme in my work is how science can inform the practice of deep learning. So today, we'll first look at language models that are trained on natural language data at scale and understand the types of structures or space of functions or solutions they learn intrinsically, and how an understanding of these structures can be then used to importantly improve their empirical generalization. We will then look at sperm whales, a system where we only have access to the outputs of the system, and ask, what do these outputs even reveal about the system's underlying structure and complexity, and what kinds of social behaviors does it drive? And finally, I won't have the time to talk about this very much, but I've also studied how building language-like structures into robots can enable them to do better long horizon reasoning and planning, all while being very data efficient. Okay, so let's talk about the first system, language models. Now, a large language model these days is typically made of a few stacked layers of what is called transformer blocks, and it's trained on the task of next token prediction. So given a span of words like this, for every token, the model outputs the probability distribution of the next token. Okay, now what we want to do here is understand what we can say about the function that's being learned under the hood. Now, to understand the learned solution in a language model, one thing you can do is you can probe the model's representation for a select set of properties. But this is only going to tell you one thing at a time. It might tell you about the information present in the model, but not really how that information is transformed over different layers and finally maps onto the answer. So one way in which you're going to work towards understanding this language model is by performing an intervention on this part of the network and measure how changing this model ever so slightly affects the behavior of the language model. And one way in which we did this was we took different matrices in this model and approximated them. Okay, and following this modification, we once again measure the behavior of this model and see how the model changes. Are the errors systematic in any way? How does the approximation lead to the representation changing, and so on? And while there are many different ways of approximating matrices, we replace the matrices in this model with their low rank approximation. So we call this operation laser, which stands for layer selective rank reduction, and we change just one matrix at a time. Now, what might you expect, right? As you throw away information from this model, how do you expect the accuracy of the model on a task to change? Right? You might expect that with increasing amounts of rank reduction, the accuracy of the model on the task should worsen, right? Because we're approximating the learned matrices in a model. However, we saw that this kind of rank reduction of the MLP weight matrices in these large transformer models led to an increase in the accuracy of the model, here by about 8 percentage points on question answering accuracy. And the point with the highest accuracy corresponded to when we reduced the rank of the matrix from 4,096 all the way to 20, which is almost a 99.5% reduction. So this is particularly surprising because you're just throwing out information from these matrices and you continue to see models improve. So there seems to be some kind of interference effect of the higher ordered components in these matrices. We also saw that this was true across a wide range of data sets and models of different sizes. And in red, I'm highlighting cases where this kind of intervention shows an improvement of at least 5 percentage points. Now, what's interesting is sometimes it can improve your model's performance by over 30 percentage points by simply throwing out information. And this holds outside of the text domain. And people have tried to use this for more principal compression, for debiasing models. And there's also some theoretical work on understanding why laser works. So what we saw here was that it's possible to both simultaneously enhance a model's task performance while reducing its size in a completely gradient-free way. And if there's one thing I'd like you to take away, it's that there are these smaller and more optimal transformers within larger transformers. Now, in this part, we saw how you could come up with techniques that allow us to improve complex AI models by approximating them with simpler surrogate models. But here we had white box access. Now, could we use a similar approach to understand biological intelligence, a system where we only have black box access to the system? So my window into the computation in the minds of animals is through their externalized communication and behavior. I study this in the context of sperm whales. What is the complexity of their communication, and how does it really drive a range of intelligent behaviors that these systems exhibit? So a bit about sperm whales. So sperm whales are animals with the largest brains to have ever existed on this planet. And they live in these complex matriarchal societies where the members of the family coordinate hunting. When they're 600 meters under the water, there's no light, and sound is both a major mode of perception and communication. They take turns babysitting each other's young ones, and they socialize for these extended periods of times while coordinating in complete darkness. They exchange these long sequences of sounds with one another, and it has been shown that they're communicating. But what we don't know is what is it that they're saying, and how are they doing it, right? So that is what we've set out to find. So they sound something like this. Not sure if the audio is coming through. Okay. So their communication calls are believed to be made of these packets of clicks called coders. And past research identified around 21 distinct call types in these whales. But almost everything else about this communication system, including questions about its structure and information carrying capacity, just remained unknown. But there was this clear thing that seemed to confuse a lot of scientists, right? Like, how could these animals exhibit such complex group behaviors in complete darkness, but at the same time have such a limited communication system with just 21 calls? So something did not add up here. So one of the features that allows human language to express an infinite space of complex meanings is this property known as duality of patterning. It's how like a set of meaningless elements or phonemes like combine to form words like banana, which can then in turn be combined to form sentences like time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana, fruit flies like banana. So, then you can index into the space of really infinite space of complex meanings by just combining these finite set of meaningless sounds. Now, our analysis showed that coders in sperm whales are not defined by a fixed set of 21 call types as previously thought, but actually formed a combinatorial coding system, where every call was created by sampling different variations of a set of features, each of which could be independently varied, like an alphabet. And the resulting set of individual sounds that the whales were capable of producing and sensing had 10 times higher information carrying capacity, showing that the sperm whale communication system was significantly more expressive than what was previously believed. This work also became part of public discourse and was covered in the New York Times and National Geographic. And this gave us a way to go from whale calls to the alphabet or informative features of their calls. But we had no idea what rules govern how these calls get sequenced together, or what is it that these whales are even talking about. So in some more recent work, we actually built a really large sequence model of sperm whale calls and behavior, and showed how these models can be used not just for prediction, but to actually assist scientists with making discoveries about this unknown communication system. So by systematically manipulating the data that the model can get trained on and measuring the impact of these manipulations on the model's predictive power, you can start to isolate what aspects of the calls and behavior carry information about future calls and future behaviors and how they are communicating. And these experiments provide the first evidence that sperm whale vocalizations exhibit this long-range structure above the single coda level, and how it's used to coordinate future behaviors, something that was previously not known. And more generally, this work kind of offers a framework for using tools of AI to not just build predictive models of complex biological systems, but to further our understanding and assist scientists with making discoveries that would have been out of reach. So in conclusion, we discovered how the sperm whale communication system was a combinatorial coding system whose structure was utilized to express and coordinate these complex future behaviors. So to kind of put these pieces together, we saw how there are smaller and more optimal transformers within larger transformers, and the sperm whale communication system is a combinatorial coding system where the external complexity can be explained by a set of simple alphabets and their combination, right? So it's really that these very simple structures could underlie these very complex external behaviors. And this has been very exciting to me, but all of this is really simply scratching the surface. And I'm very excited about, a few questions in the future. Today we saw how, there are these two types of systems, AI systems that are getting increasingly better at responding to complex queries, and biological systems that are robust and adaptable, and very importantly, energy efficient, but they have specialized strategies to suit their environments. But in both of these systems, we do not currently have like a clear scientific understanding of their computational underpinnings, of their intelligent behaviors, and how do we even bridge this gap? So in the long run, I want to build capable reasoning systems by engineering the right kind of structure that scales. And going forward in my research, I see the following path, and I'm very excited to kind of build my lab over the next year and get to learn from the students that I work with. And here are some questions, but this is just like a rough sketch, and it's bound to change. But I really want to understand, what cannot be learned by deep networks at scale. You also want to think more about how do we enable scientific discovery guided by neural solutions like we did in the case of the whale language model, but where the hypothesis space might be much larger. And I want to understand what powers the learning mechanisms across animals and explain the differences in their capabilities to communicate and reason. I also started my journey in AI with robotics. And even though I've spent a lot of time thinking about language and language-like structure, I think to really bridge the gap, we need to learn from interactions. So how should information about from lifelong interactions, both physical or textual, be integrated into learning, or how language models are updated in this never-ending fashion? This is something I'm working with Michael on. Okay. And in the long run, I want to build a unified understanding of complex sequential representation systems like language, action sequences, genetic code, and thought, and how, despite operating at very different scales, they have very similar structures: compositional, hierarchical, productive. So what is really going on? And through all of these, ultimately, that thing that really drives me is understanding the computational underpinnings of biological systems and actually improving the computational underpinnings of AI systems. Yeah, and I'm happy to take more questions.
Yeah, there are a couple in here. Let me just scroll up. Someone asked, I'm curious, why is the whale specifically targeted in the research, and can the research be extended to other aquatic animals?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's a few reasons why we targeted sperm whales specifically. So, there's like the biological basis for why there might be complex communication in the first place. So, for example, they have a long lifespans, their communication system is acquired, and they communicate in in the depths of the ocean where there's no light, right? So sound becomes a major mode of like information exchange. Whereas in terrestrial animals, a lot of communication can be, via body language and so on. But the ideas that we're like kind of developing here are very can be extended to other animals. So for example, building sequence models of animal calls and behaviors is something that we're actively pursuing also in other animals like elephant fishes, and also like this cross species kind of way. But yeah, so that's why sperm whales were chosen. And a lot of the ideas like building sequence models over the calls of these animals can be easily extended to other species. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Hi, Dr. Sharma. Do you consider PhD applicants with interdisciplinary backgrounds? Are there specific backgrounds you prefer? Many of your projects draw on biology. If I don't have formal biology training, which perspectives or skills would you prioritize?
That's a very good question. So just, to be clear, I'm also not a biologist and I have no training in biology. So actually, all of this work is, it's a plus if you have like a background in biology where there's it's not a mandatory at all. And at the end of the day, I think, what I'm looking for is maybe students with very strong background in computer science and mathematics, because we are looking at a lot of these questions from a computational lens.
Great. And then there's just one more. Oh, actually two more, if that's okay. How do you adapt new AI features with your projects?
How do you adapt new AI features with your projects? Okay. So yeah, so that's actually like a very interesting question, right? Because there's like the tools that we can use to study these animals that are simultaneously like changing, improving their new techniques, right? And what we learned from a lot of these studies and the wave setting also helped me have shaped how I think about, planning and robotics and so on. So there's like this two-way transfer. Yeah, and how does it evolve? Like, to be honest, like the new tools that come up, like every other day, that kind of we end up trying to see if there's a good fit to like if we can use it in the problems that we're looking at, but we don't try to force a fit, right? So for example, with with a lot of the whales data, we have videos of these whales underwater that is very difficult for any human to annotate. And if we were to build a custom annotator, that would just take a ton of work, right? So there's like a lot of these off-the-shelf, very powerful models like Segment Anything, some of the newer video models that have been so useful in terms of just helping us annotate a lot of the data that we're getting and then do further science on it. In fact, like building these sequence models and increasingly expressive sequence models across a range of species would not have been possible without actually learning from a lot of the new tools and techniques that are being discovered and on the other side. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and last question is, where did it go? Oh, are you looking to further the research of the whale towards birds? Can you share about any other ongoing research in this context?
Yes. So we haven't been studying birds particularly, but if you're interested in studying birds, then it would, why not, right? Like I think every species lives in a very unique environment, has its own set of challenges, and the communication system that arises. There might be parallels, but there's also like a lot of unique structures. So yes, maybe definitely in the future, it's something if you're excited about, and I'm excited about for sure. But right now we've mostly been studying elephant fish, which are these fish that are, not very big, but have like very complex social dynamics, have, so to speak, some kind of like their own politics, and the bigger fish kind of like bully the smaller fish, and like, they communicate in very complex ways. And they communicate via electric pulses. And we've just been trying to understand what gives rise to these really complex social dynamics in electric fish. We've also been studying the bioacoustics across animals. So like this really large database across birds, whales, monkeys, elephants, etc. But it's like trying to build tools that would help biologists study the different species better. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that is it. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Professor Sharma. I really appreciate your time today. Cristina, I think we're waiting for Sumit to join for the medical track still. So I was thinking we could answer a few of the questions for the PhD
Sounds like a
program.
good idea.
So there's one question here, and I think this may be relevant. There's I think several questions that are similar to this about having a prior degree that may not have provided a lot of like research experience before applying to the PhD. So the question is it realistic to expect to get into a program like this without that prior experience?
I would say sort of like it's not a strict requirement, but in practice, because sort of it's such a competitive program and we get so many good applicants, it's going to be difficult to be competitive without some substantial prior research experience in data science or related fields. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's just it it lowers the odds by quite a bit, I would say.
Yes, it's very competitive. So you will be working against other people that may have some experience already. Okay, next question. So some folks are maybe wrapping up a program right now, maybe undergrad or a master's program. And so they probably won't graduate until the end of December or maybe next semester. So they're wondering how will their application be reviewed if their academic record is not yet complete?
I mean, that happens very often. Most people are in the process of getting a degree of some sort in this semester, so that's in no way a problem. We review the information based on the material that we are provided. So if you already have transcripts for this semester, then we can look at that. If not, we're going to look at the materials prior. And it's in no way affecting your chances, the fact that you're still doing coursework in another program.
How does a PhD in data science differ from one in statistics or computer science? Is it more applied research?
It doesn't necessarily have to be, because again, we have the machine learning research area and the theory research area, where I would argue the distinctions are a bit less clear. I think sort of like relevance for specific application domains might make a point of distinction even when you're working on very theoretical stuff. So there, it can be doing theory, but with a more direct eye on how that theory might affect practice later down the road. So that's one answer. The second answer is, again, like we have a lot of our faculty co-affiliated with an application domain department. And then there's really a translational component where we take the core methodology and apply them to concrete problems in different scientific areas. The way Pratyusha was talking about, for instance. Yeah, and sort of like there might be opportunities of that sort in a CS program, but those would be sort of like idiosyncratic. They would happen because a particular faculty in that program happens to have that kind of interest, whereas here they're kind of like structurally built into how we recruit our faculty and how we build the program as a whole.
I think
I assume it's there, so maybe we can move on.
I think other questions will be answered later on. Alrighty, let me just get my screen back up here. Okay, so next up we will be hearing from Professor Sumit Chopra, Associate Professor at the Courant Institute of Mathematical Sciences, as well as the Department of Radiology at NYU Langone Health. Professor Chopra is also Director of Machine Learning Research at the Department of Radiology, as well as an affiliated faculty of the Centers for Data Science. So I'll pass it over to you, Sumit. Will you be sharing slides or just speaking?
Yes, I will share a few slides.
Okay, so I'll
just
stop
to
sharing.
give a bit of grounding to what I'm speaking. So thanks, Francheska, for the introduction. Let me, I guess, share my slides. I hope you can see them.
Yes.
Cool. Let me do a full screen. Cool. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this information session. I guess Francesca introduced me with regards to my credentials and what I'm doing here, essentially my position. So the next 10-15 minutes or so, essentially, I wanted to give you essentially a sales pitch about why you should pursue PhD at the Center for Data Science, specifically if your primary interests are in the area of machine learning and healthcare. Right. So as most of you would know, but if not, NYU actually has like there are two major parts of NYU. One is, of course, uh, like the non-medical part where CDS is a part of, and you have Courant Institute, you have CDS, and a whole bunch of other institutes and departments. Actually, there are three major parts. The second one is the School of Engineering, that's also called the Tandon School of Engineering, and the third, which is by far the biggest part, is the NYU Grossman School of Medicine and the NYU Langone Health Center. So, and being one of the larger health system in New York City area, NYC metropolitan area, it gives us quite a bit of sort of advantages in terms of folks like us, like researchers like us who want to work in this interdisciplinary field of AI in healthcare. Because I think we have a very large patient population, and the school and the health system itself is growing over the course of years, as in we are acquiring new practices, we are acquiring building new hospitals. So that's definitely growing, and with that growth comes the growth in patient population, the diversity, and so on and so forth. So that gives us a lot of sort of opportunities to do pursue research in this area. So specifically for this presentation, what I'm going to do is essentially detail down on maybe four or five aspects, or the sort of the reasons why um, this is the right place to be if you really want to do machine learning in healthcare research and pursue a PhD in this direction. And the slides are actually were made by my colleague Dan Sodikson, who traditionally gives this presentation up until I gave this last year, and doing it again today. So not much has changed in terms of the content, but the details might differ. So which I'll talk about. So the first reason I feel any of you who is interested in pursuing research in this area to join CDS specifically is basically the set of problems that we have in healthcare that are essentially born or motivated by the needs of the School of Medicine, right? And the set of problems are diverse, right? Like as I said, it's a really large health system. So and it has really big set of departments which are actively pursuing research in AI. Like one of the leaders or one of the leading departments in the space is the Department of Radiology, of course, which I'm one of the members of. And the kind of problems we work on there are diverse, right? Like, I mean, when somebody thinks about AI and radiology, the first thing that comes to mind is that, okay, you're given a medical image like an X-ray or an MR or a CT scan, and you want to build a model to render diagnosis. I think to me that's almost an injustice to the kind of work to the kind of potential or the impact that AI can make within this medical imaging domain, because it's not just about image analysis as far as radiology is concerned. There are so many other problems within this field of medical imaging that AI can, when sort of used effectively, can have a significant impact, right? Like some of the examples that I want to share is, for instance, it's in addition to medical imaging, for instance, you could use AI a little more upstream, in the sense that rather than taking as input a medical image which has been generated after collecting a whole bunch of measurements taken by whatever scanner you're using, those measurements need not necessarily be in the human interpretable form, and you do some sort of a math to generate those to convert those measurements into these images. You essentially could go upstream and actually figure out what sort of and work in the non-human interpretable domain, in where you're actually collecting the measurements, and figure out what sort of measurements actually you need to take, right? So essentially, or in other words, coming up, or how I like to frame this problem is like learn um, how to, like, what data sets to collect, or think of the data acquisition also as a machine learning problem, rather than assuming that the data is already given and all you're doing is building a machine learning model on top of whatever data is provided to you, right? And this once you sort of start going in that mindset, lots of possibilities emerge, in the sense that you could use AI to sort of expedite the MRI scans. You could use AI to decrease the radiation dosage in CT scans and still generate a high quality image. You could use AI to build models that are robust to a user's or a technician's motion on an ultrasound probe, which is highly, as we all know, is highly sensitive, because the way you put the ultrasound probe in any human body, the image that it generates is squarely a function of how accurately you're placing the probe, right? So so in that case, you would work in the raw sound wave signal as opposed to the 2D video or the image that an ultrasound probe generates. So there are like the cool thing about the School of Medicine at NYU is that the infrastructure and the culture and the mindset of people is such that they want to work in this sort of fundamental directions that can have a long-term impact. So it's not just about like publishing the next flavor of the month paper based on the best flavor of the month algorithm, but more like dedicate your resources or your energies and expertise to sort of make a fundamental change. And why I say fundamental is because all of these things can lead to essentially uh, transformative impact in healthcare. You could build scanners that are significantly cheaper, right? Like an MR scanner that looks like a chair could be sitting in a Walmart. You could just go there and sit there and get your scan done, as opposed to the current environment, which is very high friction, where you have to book an appointment, go to an imaging center, wait there for a couple of hours, get a scan done, which in itself can take a couple of hours and so on, of half an hour or so, and so on and so forth. So that's just the set of problems in the Department of Radiology, right? And then there are similar problems in Department of Ophthalmology. There are similar problems in the Department of Histopathology, which is basically where you're looking at microscopic uh, images of your tissue biopsies and so on and so forth, right? And then, of course, this is only about the imaging side of things. There are problems that are associated with the EHR, like essentially electronic health record, where basically you have all the clinical data that is associated with millions of patients that we have as part of our hospital, and where people are exploring like how to build models to not just diagnose but also come up with better ways to treat patients, like which is more under the realm of precision medicine, right? And come up with what treatments are effective or non-effective and why they're non-effective and stuff like that. And then also the department, the hospital or the School of Medicine also has a significant computational genomics department, where there's a lot of research going on in a bunch of problems in that space as well, including research on single cell transcriptomics, where basically you have images of single cells and you want to figure out stuff, right? And from a technique standpoint, like again, School of Medicine in general and any specific departments in particular are not necessarily married to any such techniques, and it's basically what works or what solutions we come up with is basically what we focus on, rather than, okay, I just have this LLM and that's what I want to apply to everywhere else, right? So that's like that hopefully gives you an idea of the set of problems. Like, in to summarize, basically there are plenty of diverse set of problems if you come in and you join and you decide to work in this area, that you can latch onto and work in the direction and make a significant impact, right? The second major reason why you'd want to join is the people, right? Like, as I said, the School of Medicine is is a very large part of NYU as an organization, and and as a result, there's obviously like a healthy amount of collaboration that goes on between folks from CDS who are working in healthcare and folks who are working in clinicians or sort of research faculty who are working on the School of Medicine, where The good thing about this CDS PhD medical track is that if you join as a student, you'll get to see the best of both worlds, right? Like we have about around 5 or so, maybe 6 core faculty within CDS who are actively working in applying machine learning to healthcare problems, like namely the director of CDS, Carlos. We have Rajesh Ranganath, we have myself, we have Kyung Cho, and others. And then there's plenty of other people. I think I would say more than 20 plus folks, 20 to 30 plus folks who are actually working on core AI related problems on the School of Medicine side. And in addition, we have many other clinicians who are not really AI experts, but are always looking for computationally inclined students to work with them on problems that they are interested in. And the cool thing about this sort of partnership, or the bridge between CDS and the School of Medicine, is that you don't just are sort of siloed into a set of cohesive group of people who have similar expertise, right? Like, I mean, you have AI expertise on the CDS side, but on the School of Medicine side, you have a diverse set of expertise, right? Like you obviously have clinical doctors, you have like geneticists, you have MR physicists, who, like when I was talking about this developing new types of scanners and so on and so forth. You have radio frequency experts, you have a biologist. So there's like a diverse expertise that will be available for you at your disposal for you to work on sort of creative problems, right? And the cool thing about specifically the CDS PhD program is that once you enroll and you get admitted, you by design, you will have 2 advisors. One will be on the CDS side and the other person will be on the School of Medicine side. So you'll be working with 2 sets of people together to pursue your research. Uh, and so, yes, so of course, like you want to focus on your research on a specific problem, but having access to such diverse expertise can only benefit you in the long run, because you'll get to see different perspectives and appreciate the uh, the importance of other side of the aisle as well. Right. And the third thing that I want to emphasize that the School of Medicine is very good at doing, and assuming you become a part of it, then you will also be in some shape or form involved in it. Not necessary, but depends on the project, of course. Is basically external partnerships, right? Like one of the major factors that distinguishes the School of Medicine from maybe other universities is that they have managed to forge very strong industry partnerships, in addition to, of course, like the in-house NYU wide collaborations that I'm talking about. This is mostly on the industry side. Like, for instance, we have very strong partnership with Siemens, which is basically one of the largest medical imaging device suppliers or manufacturers in the world. And in fact, we are one of their, I think, second, 2 or maybe 3 major academic test beds, where whenever they design a new scanner, the first thing they want to do is, of course, you want to test it on real population, right? And then they would approach the School of Medicine to work with us to sort of install that scanner, that prototype scanner for that matter, to see whether it is working or not, and how can we improve it, and so on and so forth. And partnerships like this allow us to think big, right? Like, I mean, because of course, like building an MR scanner that looks like a chair is not like you can do it in your own in your own garage or a 2-bedroom lab, but you really need a significant infrastructure from an industrial standpoint. So that enables us. Similarly, we have partnerships with organizations like Philips and a whole bunch of other industry players in healthcare. And like and it's not just about hardware, and it's also about software, right? Like, I mean, one of the sort of highlight of these partnerships that had come into fruition is our partnership with Facebook out of all companies, which is basically when the Department of Radiology partnered with Facebook to develop these deep learning models that basically, as I said, instead of working straight up on the images, work in the raw signal space to essentially expedite your MR scans, right? And that resulted in this very famous project, a now famous project called the Fast MRI, which essentially took the whole industry by storm in the sense that now pretty much every scanner, regardless of whether it is Siemens or GE or blah blah, they use deep learning techniques to expedite the MR scan so that your scan that initially might have taken 40 minutes, 40 minutes to an hour now maybe can be reduced to maybe 20 minutes or 15 minutes, which is obviously beneficial both from a cost standpoint and from a patient perspective standpoint. So there are many examples of such partnerships that are that the School of Medicine engage, and depending again on the project that you're working on, you might get involved in one of them, right? And then the fourth thing is the data, right? Like, as I said, it's a fairly large health system. I won't say it's the largest in the New York area. I think the largest still is Northwell, but I think it's the second or the third largest. And the data set is tremendous, right? Like, I mean, just to give you some number to throw there, we on an annual basis, we conduct approximately 35 million procedures, right? And these procedures could be imaging studies, could be ECGs, could be any blood tests, and so on and so forth. So about 35 million odd procedures. So like imagine if you're developing a multimodal model using imaging plus ECG data and maybe other clinical information, and you have data worth, I don't know, last 20, 30 years that we've been collecting. So that's a tremendous amount of data that can give you a good amount of uh, sort of tools to work with and essentially work on your research. And the cool thing relating to data is that the sort of the IT side of the school has done a tremendous job in making sure that this data sets that is currently being acquired on a daily basis, these clinical tests and all the other stuff, uh, is actually structured and stored in a way so that it is relatively easy to access if you are a researcher working in this area. Like, of course, you have to go through uh, the the standard regulatory hurdles of getting an IRB approved and being a part of the IRB and all of those things, but and taking your appropriate trainings and stuff. But once you've done those things, which are always necessary, you will have access to such data uh, in a relatively low friction setting, which will of course like enhance your research. So and yeah, so just from an imaging standpoint, we roughly conduct about 3 million imaging procedures on an annual basis, right? And it's not just the data that we are collecting as part of our clinical practice, like whenever a patient comes in, but again, the School of Medicine provides the support and infrastructure that if you have a new idea that, okay, I want to build an AI model uh, uh, that tells me based on someone's urine test whether they have XYZ disease or not. Something that has not been done for, and of course, you don't store the urine samples either, right? But the School of Medicine has the infrastructure to essentially, like, provided you have the funding, they have the infrastructure to set up new clinical protocols to collect new data sets that may not even exist right now on a prospective basis. And that is a tremendous tool to have in your repertoire, right? Because once you build your model on a retrospective data set, your end goal is essentially to test it in a real world setting on real clinical patients and in a prospective manner, right? So, and sometimes that retrospective data may not even be available. So the School of Medicine provides you with that ability to uh, sort of set up these new protocols of data collection. And of course, like, I mean, I'm not saying that you'll be able to collect that data that way very fast. I mean, it does take some time, but nevertheless, that facility exists. And then the fifth part is the science side of things, right? Like as I mentioned, that we are not just involved in sort of taking off the shelf machine learning models and applying it to healthcare data set and see which one sticks. Our goal here to fundamentally change the way healthcare is done using AI. And a good part of that is essentially asking fundamental questions, right? Like again, in medical imaging, like medical image analysis is not our end goal. Our end goal is to use AI to transform how we diagnose diseases, right? And now that diagnosis could come from analyzing medical images. It could come from analyzing other types of multimodal sensor or sensor data that you might want to collect, or it could be any other um, uh, avenue that might inform the end diagnosis for an AI model, right? And and similarly, like even when you build a prediction model, right? Like suppose you say that okay, you have this multimodal data of images and ECGs and a bunch of other stuff that you think is important, and you plug that into your model and you do some sort of a prediction model. Uh, our science or our research does not stop at just reporting the aggregate numbers or oh yes, our model works and blah blah, but actually the culture is such that you want to go back and figure out like what actually is happening, why is the model saying what it is saying, right? And that could be either you're sort of trying to figure out what the model is interpreting, or it could also involve like discovering new biomarkers, right? And or or what I sort of like to phrase it as like doing real science there, right? You just don't want to build an end-to-end prediction model, but actually figuring out what is it that the model is learning new things, if at all it is, right? And like similarly, like of course, as you all are very aware that last few years has seen a significant sort of advance in LLM based models, right? Like, so the goal here is not just to take an LLM and just like, I don't know, summarize clinical notes and blah, blah, but actually figure out newer problems that can be scientifically interesting, both from a research or a scientific standpoint, and also from a patient betterment of a patient standpoint, right? In short, the culture there is to actually work on more fundamental side of problems rather than just like applying off the shelf machine learning models, which essentially means that you'll be sort of working in developing more fundamental techniques in this area. Right. And then, of course, the last thing that last reason why I feel that CDS medical track is a right place to be is because of the potential of impact of your research, right? Like again, you won't be, if you are enrolled as a PhD student in the medical track, you won't not necessarily, absolutely, you will not be working in a silo on a small toy data set working on some method that shows some improvement or improves some baseline numbers on a toy data set. You'll actually be working with real world data set on real set of problems. And if you're able to crack that problem and come up with a solution that is safe and effective, chances are very high that solution of yours can actually get implemented in a real clinical setting. And in fact, I as a faculty member and also as a prior co-founder of a startup in AI for healthcare startup, uh, my recommendation or encouragement to you all would also be that whenever you're working on problems, don't just work for the sake of publishing a paper. Work for the sake of building methods or new technology that can actually have a real clinical impact, right? Because once you're here, this will actually be something that will be available to you, right? And once you have that impact, and that impact could be that your tool or whatever technology you develop gets deployed within the School of Medicine, or it could also involve, if you have an entrepreneurial bend, you could probably start a startup along with that and stuff like that. But those are like long-term things. But at least the opportunity for you to make a widespread impact is tremendous. Right, specifically, as I said, like this fast MRI thing, like some of the examples that I like to give is this fast MRI project, which actually now is not just impacting the scans that we are taking within the School of Medicine, but pretty much the entire healthcare industry. Like most new modern day MR machines use the fast MRI deep learning based models that were invented as part of that research. Like another example of an impact I give is this in-house a large language model that we built, or colleagues of mine, including Kyung-Yung Cho, who's a faculty at CDS, built. And Dr. Eric Orman, who's a neurosurgeon in the department of neurosurgery, um, is this large language model that was trained on large scale in-house clinical data, and that has been deployed in multiple facets within the health system. And this code, I believe, is also open source and has been used by others as well. So there's a huge opportunity for impact. Yeah, so I guess that's pretty much it. So I'd like to stop here and don't just like take my word for it. And I believe there are a few student presentations that follow this thing, which will give you a little more shed more light on the kind of research that folks are doing, which will hopefully convince you that it's not just about like what I call shallow learning, but more about solving some really interesting problems.
Awesome. Thank you, Sumit. There actually are a few questions in the chat, if you're okay with responding to a few.
Sure.
Okay, so one that's somewhat repeated, and I think you touched on this a little bit already. Does an applicant need to have a background in biology or healthcare to apply for the medical school track?
So I think like my general answer would be no, or not necessary. The applicant certainly needs to have a lot of interest in that area, but it's not necessary. But again, I think it would also depend on the PI or the faculty who from the School of Medicine who are looking for such applicants. Because like it's like it'll depend a lot on essentially their interaction with the faculty on the other side. But the general sentiment among the faculty on the School of Medicine side is that um, it's somewhat feasible or easier for a student to come in and learn the biology and the healthcare side of things than for them to learn the core machine learning part of side of things. So the general expectation is that the applicant should be strong from a computational and a mathematical standpoint. Learning the sort of the constraints and the knowledge of a specific domain is that can be done, right? And in fact, one of the student speakers who will follow me, who actually is a student of mine and a faculty at the School of Medicine, Dan Sodikson, uh, is a prime example, right? His name is Arda. Like he's very strong from a mathematical standpoint, and he was not familiar with like MR image reconstruction, at least prior to joining. But over the course, he has developed sufficient amount of skills and expertise in that direction to basically succeed.
Great, thank you. And along those lines, there's also one question where this person has some previous publications with early diagnosis based on human activity recognition and 2D medical image data sets, but they don't have experience with 3D medical image data. Is that something that could affect their application when applying if they don't have that experience already?
I don't know, so not at all. Like again, like the focus is mostly on the computational skills
Right.
rather than the application domain.
Absolutely. Let's see. So there's one question. Someone is, would like to maybe understand the difference between research in computational biology at Courant versus like CDS. So I guess the difference at within computer science and then in data science.
Yeah. So like specifically from computational biology,
Mhm.
uh, I don't think there is any specific difference as such. I think again it depends on the faculty, right? Like I mean, like many faculty are actually even joint between Courant and CDS. And if they are doing computational biology, I think that's so there's not a lot of difference unless I mean Cristina thinks otherwise.
I think maybe like in terms of bioinformatics, there's some faculty in Courant that do that we wouldn't have so much CDS representation. So it depends a little bit on the specific niche. But you can have a look at the individual faculty to get a sense of the specific topic that you're interested in, if it's better represented in one department or the other.
Yeah.
And I'll just take one last one for you, Sumit. What qualifications are you particularly looking for in PhD applicants?
Like me as in Mimi?
Yeah, they specifically asked
Okay,
you.
I see. So yeah, so like as I said, so my sort of criteria for looking at students is essentially strong mathematical fundamentals, and if the student is like a master student who's had some machine learning courses and blah blah, then basically the fundamentals of machine learning. Right, that's all I care about. I think the other things can be easily acquired as they move along. Like 5 years is a pretty decent amount of period to acquire other domain knowledge, but mostly the things that I focus on are core mathematical understanding of probability, statistics, linear algebra, and if they have taken any machine learning courses, then the fundamentals.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to our next round of lightning talks here. So as Professor Chopra mentioned, our next presenter is one of our PhD students, Arta Atalik, who is co-advised by Professor Chopra, Daniel Sodexon, and Kyun Hyun Cho. And then we'll round out the lightning talks with another presentation from Professor Juan Carlos Perdomo Silva, who is an assistant professor in computer science engineering at Tandon and here at the Center for Data Science as well. All right, so I'll stop sharing my screen and then I'll pass it over to you, Arta.
All right, hello everyone. I'm Arta Atalik. I'm a fourth-year PhD student advised by Sumit Chopra and Dan Sodexon. And my PhD topic is leveraging multifaceted site information in immerse problems with deep learning. And in short, it's MRI with memory. So MRI is a mainstay of medical diagnostic imaging, and it is powerful because of its excellent soft tissue contrast, but it is slow and expensive. And one way to expedite is to acquire less data and solve the corresponding immerse problem. The question we ask here is, what if MRI could remember the patient? Because we have lots of complementary images from the same scan. We have past scans of the patient, and we have clinical notes, or in general, electronic health records. But they're already available, but underutilized to generate the images. Maybe underutilized is even exaggeration, they're not utilized at all. And the solution here we present is personalizing the inverse problem setup with patient-specific context. And the patient-specific context can be different contrast weightings from the same session, or it could be different imaging modalities like CT, X-ray, or it could be prior scans, learned features from some related tasks, or electronic health records. And all these patient-specific contexts can be leveraged to accelerate imaging or get better images with cheap devices. And the way we do this is by using the side information in so-called ambiguous space, the problematic part of the inverse problem. And we still have the acquisition protocol, but we acquire less data and we fill the gaps with the patient-specific side information or context. We compared against using only population priors, so no patient-specific context, and we see that with context, we're able to recover fine anatomical details highlighted by these arrows, and without any context, basically we're losing essential information at high accelerations. Another important thing to consider is looking for pathologies. And if you don't use any population prior, so that's the image we get on the left-hand side. If we use only population priors, we're seeing the anatomy, but we are losing the details. So here in this case, the pathology is completely obliterated without using any context. But when we use the context, we see that even at higher accelerations like 20x, we're able to recover the pathology. So we're aiming toward faster, fairer, and smarter healthcare, and our work supports personalized medicine. So the images are informed by each patient's own history. And this lays groundwork for intelligent scanners, where we learn from context and not just from measurements. So we say the more we see you, the faster we can scan you. And briefly, life at CDS, we have interdisciplinary advising. So I have two advisors. Sumit is a computer scientist. Dan Sadikson is a MR physicist. And we have strong clinical ties. We can implement whatever we develop in our scanners and basically see the results. We also have vast amount of clinical data in MR image reconstruction or in any medical imaging. Clinical data is very important, but basically we need clinical data to show results. So we cannot use synthetic data in most cases. And basically the open source data sets are, I can say, there are only a few open source data sets in MRI, for example. We also have great compute, as everyone mentioned. So we have ultraviolet in the Langone side and green on the CDS and Courant side. And that's it in my presentation.
Thank you, Arta. Let me just see if there's any questions in here. Not seeing anything specific.
All right.
Okay, so thank you. We will pass it over now to Juan Carlos. Thank you, Arta.
Of course.
Hi. Can people see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Well, yeah, I'm Juan. I'm very excited to be here. I'm an incoming professor at NYU, jointly appointed between the departments of computer science and engineering, data science. So today I want to tell you a little bit about who I am and what the kinds of things that I'm interested in, just to give you a flavor of the kind of like the range of different topics that exist within data science and some of the collaborations that one could do while you're a student there. So I guess I'd like to think about myself as a theorist that enjoys empirical work, So my background is in theoretical computer science and statistics, and I'm recruiting students. So if these topics are interesting to you, you should definitely apply to the department this December. My area broadly, I'd like to think about it as thinking about foundations of AI in society. So thinking about algorithms and decision-making systems that interact with people. So these are like really thinking about the kind of like interaction between these different kinds of learning procedures and the people that use them and the influences that they have more broadly. So as we all know, there's a lot of excitement right now in AI. I think this is kind of goes without saying, and we've seen all these like different breakthroughs in vision and protein, like protein language models, ChatGPT. And I think a lot of the reason why we're so excited about all these advances is because AI has the potential to solve really hard social problems, right? We just heard from Sumit around the ability to use AI in medicine and radiology. There's reports from groups like the G7 that thinks about the impact of AI on economic and financial policy making, AI in education. Can we use these kinds of systems to expand opportunity to people who may not have access to tutoring or legal aid and all these kinds of different social services for which we have large justice gaps? The set of people who receive them is much smaller than the set of people who would like to have them. And maybe we can try to solve these access issues by building new programs. But we're clearly not quite there yet. Right? As we see in the news, there's all kinds of different articles showing how, this is a report from MIT that 95% of generative AI pilots at companies are failing. So when we deploy these systems within companies, most of the time they fail to add real economic value. Or we see, very sad cases of people who go spiraling within ChatGPT and end up having mental health issues. Or algorithms that prevent access to resources because they're biased and don't allow people a fair chance to get into schools or apply for housing within Los Angeles. So, and I think that the reason behind all these different kinds of issues is that predictions and algorithms, they don't exist in a vacuum, right? Like these predictions exist within a broader social context and they dynamically interact with the people around them, right? The inputs to these algorithms are people and the outputs are also kind of like, in some sense, people, like they change the things that happen to us. And these kinds of interactions introduce like various key challenges in how we design and deploy and evaluate these kinds of different systems. So my work thinks about tackling several key challenges that come in this space of like AI and society and these kinds of dynamic interactions. So of course, don't have with the time that we have, I'll try to give you a little bit of a flavor of some of the different kind of research areas that I'd like to work in. So the kind of like my presentation will have like roughly 3 kind of different vignettes. The first one I'll tell you about performative predictions. This is a topic of research I worked during my graduate school or graduate work that thinks about addressing the mechanics of how we predict things in these kinds of social environments. Then I'll think about work that thinks about prediction and allocation, where the goal is how do we think about the welfare impacts that using these algorithms for things like in education has. And then I'll speculate about some future work that I'd like to do that thinks about how do we actually represent people in data. Great. So to give you a sense of this first bit, this line of research is motivated by the observation that any kind of social prediction is fundamentally dynamic. So when we build prediction algorithms, we build these prediction algorithms by using algorithms to identify patterns in historical data, and using these predictions to take actions that influence the outcomes that we're going to predict. And these influences of our predictor then feed back into the data sets that we collect to train our algorithms, right? So to give you a kind of like a concrete example of the kind of thing that I'm talking about, over half of US high schools make some kind of prediction around which kinds of students or which students will graduate from high school on time. So you're predicting the probability that someone will graduate from high school within 4 years. So these predictions clearly influence the targets of prediction, right? If I think that someone is a fantastic student, that might increase the likelihood that they think that they belong in school, that they're going to work hard, and hence they'll do better. Or if I think that someone's going to drop out, maybe they think that they don't belong, or maybe I'll assign them extra resources. And by changing these predictions, I end up changing the likelihood of the outcome that is being predicted. And these changes then kind of feed back into the data sets that we use to train our algorithm for next year. So refer to this kind of like feedback loop or this impact of predictions on data as performativity. So, the predictions are performative, they change the data that we see. So this is like an interesting observation, but from like a formal point of view, this introduces a challenge. Like, how do we actually predict things if by just making a prediction publicly, we end up changing the likelihood of the data, right? Like, how do we deal with these kinds of feedback loops is the question that I've been interested in for a while. So to kind of tackle this challenge, my collaborators and I developed a formal framework. So it's like a set of mathematical definitions and tools that try to account for these kinds of social feedback loops. And the idea here is that by building this out, we can design algorithms that have provable guarantees of performance, right? So we're thinking about kind of theorems and propositions that kind of state that, even if things are changing, my algorithm will achieve a certain goal. So I want to give you like a kind of a sense of the kinds of problems that we tried to solve with this framework. And in fact, this framework tries to solve like this idea that predictions change the data we see is in fact very, very old. It's not something that we were the first ones to notice. So some of you might have heard of this person, Oscar Morgenstern. So Oscar Morgenstern was an Austrian mathematician. He is famous for inventing the field of game theory in his book with John von Neumann. And in his habilitation thesis from 1928, so in the 1920s, statistics was a very new field. And economists were thinking about using statistics for different kinds of prediction problems. And he argues in his book that using the tools of statistics for economic forecasting is a total fool's errand, right? Because any public forecast of economic events will change people's expectations and hence the predicted outcome. And this forms the basis of several critiques of macroeconomics later on, right? Like if the central bank predicts that inflation will increase, that changes people's economic behavior, how their purchasing their purchasing decisions, and hence influences the true inflation. So how do we make predictions if you have all these kinds of different feedback loops, right? So we can try to ask this question a little bit more formally, right? Like if the data that we see is not static, but rather it's a function of the predictions that we make, is it possible to find a prediction rule that's unbiased? So if I see features X and an outcome Y that are influenced by my predictor, can I find a prediction rule like a prediction f of X that is equal to Y, right? That kind of like it gives me an unbiased signal of the outcomes that I will see. And at a meta level, we're just asking like, is accurate social prediction even possible? So by taking these ideas and kind of casting them in this like learning theoretic framework, I was able to prove this theorem that no matter the ways in which your predictions are changing the likelihood of the outcomes, one can always find prediction rules that are unbiased, and you can find these things efficiently. There's very simple, clean algorithms that we can use to kind of provably cope with these kinds of feedback loops. So this result ties together ideas from online algorithms and kind of game theoretic statistics, that these ideas have been around for a long time, but haven't been like put in conversation with these kinds of performativity questions. And by building these bridges, I was able to come up with like a formal answer to this kind of old question. So that's to kind of give a sense of the kind of like learning theory work that I've been interested in. And now kind of wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I mentioned that I also really like doing applied empirical work. So for this second part, I want to tell you a little about some work that I did that tries to think about not so much how do we predict like a particular outcome on the basis of some information, but rather given that we did or did not predict something, what does that mean in terms of the things that we actually care about, like students graduating from high school? So this is kind of motivated by this idea that social predictions are often used to allocate social goods, to decide who gets what. So in fact, over half of US high schools have some kind of system that predicts student dropout as a means to allocate school resources. So the idea is that schools predict the likelihood of graduation for people in their community, for students in their community, and then they take students who they think are unlikely to graduate on the basis of these predictions and assign them extra resources, right? So they'll give them extra tutoring, they'll have counselors meet with them with the idea that like, I want to make sure that these students end up graduating. And the interesting thing here is that we don't super care about accuracy. Like accuracy is really not the point of the prediction. The prediction is there to address this kind of, the predictions are really a means to an end. And the bottom line point of building the system at all is because we want to increase like welfare, like some context-dependent notion of welfare, which in the school example is just like high school graduation rates. In medicine, we might predict who's sick, not because we really care, but because we want to increase their life expectancy, make sure that they're healthy. So if our predictor has like high error, but really drives like a huge improvement in life expectancy, we're pretty happy, right? But there's this question of like, how do we actually assess these like welfare impacts of our predictions? So recently, I did this project that looks at exactly this kind of dropout prediction problem in Wisconsin public schools. So we tried to ask this question. There's this program called DEWS. DEWS stands for Dropout Early Warning System. It's an initiative started by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction that operates at the state level. So they made predictions for every single student in Wisconsin public schools as to the likelihood that they were going to graduate from high school on time. And they were going to do this to try to like improve graduation rates in the state. And the question is this really true? So this work was a multi-year collaboration with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, so like the State Department of Education. And it was the first large-scale study of the long-term impacts. These kinds of dropout prediction systems are called early warning systems in the United States. So we looked at 10 years worth of data on hundreds of thousands of students, and using this kind of like very big data set, we were able to answer this question of like, what is the real bottom line impact of these kinds of prediction rules in this educational context? And just to give you a sense of what we found, kind of like the main insight is that we really need to bring this kind of like social context into bear if we want to understand the value of these algorithms. So in the case of Wisconsin, there's a very difficult and sort of sad socioeconomic reality. And it's that dropout is very highly concentrated. If we look at the population of students in the state as a whole who do not finish high school, 10% of that population comes from just 5 schools. So it's like there's a very small number of schools that account for a huge fraction of the students who fail to graduate. So while this is, in some sense like a very sobering reality, it leads to this like alternative mechanism for making predictions. Instead of trying to predict student by student who's going to graduate and intervene on the students who achieve the lowest likelihoods of graduation, we'd be better off just intervening on the worst off schools. So the idea is like the current system, what it does, it outputs a probability of graduation for every student. And then it sorts students and says, here are the students with the lowest likelihoods. Let's intervene on those. But this requires thinking about hard questions, like what is an individual probability of graduation? How do I communicate that to a counselor who has never kind of interacted with like a machine learning system in the class? And that's something we should kind of take into account. If we instead just sorted schools by the average graduation rate and intervene on the basis of schools, it's like easy to communicate, and it would be just as efficient an allocation in the sense that intervening on those students would lead to just as high an improvement in graduation rates while being significantly cheaper. So this is like the kind of flavor of problem here around where we're trying to think about the welfare impacts of these prediction algorithms. So I'll skip through this, running out of time, and just kind of get to this point that here to understand the value of prediction, we try to really bring in the social context into play. and try to kind of view the things holistically. So through our work, we were able to affect policy change. So after following publication, the Department of Public Instruction changed the program and the way they did, changed the way they allocated interventions to over 200,000 students each year. And I found this project super exciting, not just because of the things that happen in practice, but it really kind of like opened my eyes to a new line of kind of like theory work that tries to think about how do the design of algorithms, when we use these predictions to specifically allocate scarce resources. And that's something that I'm really excited to get to in the future. So I guess I'm sort of running out of time, so maybe I'll just skip through the end. And yeah, I think NYU, just tell you a little bit about why I think NYU is such a great place to do your PhD and why I'm such a great place for me to be there. I think it's such a large university with fantastic people in all sorts of different areas. So just for the context of my own work, I'm really interested in kind of thinking about connections between kind of say like performativity in medicine, right? Like these things happen all the time. If I predict someone's going to be sick, that changes the kind of treatments that they receive. What's the right way to think about predictions in these contexts? How do we bring in kind of like more perspectives from the social sciences and collaborations with people in sociology to the kind of machine learning to think about what is the right way to kind of communicate predictions to people if we're going to start to deploy these things. There's obviously like applied work, thinking about connections with these areas in language modeling and kind of like core TCS questions as well. So with that, I'll stop and take some questions.
Yeah, there are a few here in the chat. Let's see. One prospective applicant says, I'm super interested in the type of work you're doing. I currently work with credit risk models in Latin America and how their output is changing the financial landscape in the region. Are you searching for specific areas of applications in the students you are looking to recruit?
I don't think so. I think I'm thinking about very broadly, like just looking for very strong candidates and looking to kind of like empower them to think about the applications that they care about. I'm pretty open-minded in terms of different application domains.
All right. Would it be right to assume that your work focuses on how can the predictive algorithms be generalized for the unseen new data that could be affected by the previous predicted results?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a great question. That's exactly the kind of question that we were trying to like put on like mathematical footing by developing like performative prediction framework and think about that kind of problem formally.
Awesome. And then just one more. May I ask what kind of tools you use to research performative prediction and prediction in resource allocation?
Great question. I think the I really enjoy is like bringing together like different areas of research. So there's a lot of like core machine learning theory and kind of like statistical theory around generalization and like kind of concentration inequalities. There's also tools from like convex optimization and just like mathematical programming. There's tools from like online learning and different areas. Yeah, I really enjoy that. I guess that's the part of the work that I like the most is like learning about different things and seeing how you can kind of put them together to solve the problems that I care about.
Awesome. Thank you. Yep, I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Pull my slides back up here. Alrighty. Okay, so now it's my turn. As I introduced myself at the beginning of the session, I'm Francheska Jimenez, Assistant Director of Academic and Student Affairs here at the Center for Data Science. And so I'll be presenting some more detailed information about our admissions processes and application reminders. So firstly, with regards to our admissions requirements, we welcome applications from candidates with relevant undergraduate and graduate degrees. So this can be within math, statistics, computer science, engineering, and other scientific disciplines. Of course, there are, other academic backgrounds that we are also open to, as Professor Savin mentioned earlier in the session. That's a very interdisciplinary field. So you don't necessarily need to have a undergrad degree in computer science specifically, but you should have a strong foundation in both programming and quantitative skills. So that's why coursework and other equivalent experience that we expect applicants to have are in calculus, probability, statistics, and programming, and these are required to have. You must receive your undergraduate degree from an institution of recognized standing before enrollment. So one that is either institution in the US or equivalent. It could be obviously an international institution, but it must be an accredited one. So there are some more specific details about this on the Graduate School of Arts and Science webpage here. As I mentioned before, this presentation recording will be shared at a later time, so you'll be able to access this information. If you are unsure, though, you can always contact the graduate school at their email alias, gsas.admissions@nyu.edu, and they do conduct degree eligibility reviews, so they will be able to let you know if you have any concerns about your specific institution or program. They'll confirm whether or not it's eligible or not. We do want to emphasize that this is a full-time program. Students are here full-time. There is no option to be working full-time and partaking in the program full-time simultaneously. Students are offered fellowships covering tuition fees and health insurance, and the fellowship also includes a competitive stipend. So these packages are 5-year commitments for fall and spring semesters. It helps to offset any costs outside of tuition and fees. So with the application requirements, we require a TOEFL or IELTS exam of applicants who are not native English speakers or do not have a bachelor's or master's degree from an institution where the language of instruction is English. So again, as I mentioned earlier, if you are unsure whether your institution qualifies under this, you can reach out to the graduate school just for further clarification. For the IELTS exam, there's a recommended minimum band score of 7, and then for the TOEFL, a recommended minimum score of 100. We require your college transcript, so this would be from any institution that you were enrolled in. So, if maybe you transferred from one school to another, you want to make sure that you are submitting transcripts from both schools. 3 letters of recommendation, preferably on the recommender's letterhead. That is not a requirement, but it is highly, highly recommended. Statement of academic purpose. And then please note that the GRE exam is optional. It's not required nor recommended and would not have any positive or negative impact on your application. There is no minimum GPA requirement as well. I think we were getting a lot of questions about that in the Q&A. So just want to clarify that as well. And then just for any more specific details with regards to requirements, you can find all this information on our webpage as well. Okay, so important dates and information. So the application is open. You can access it on the link provided here. GSAS and CDS, we both offer very limited application fee waivers. So details can be found within the online application itself, but if you have yet to start your application and just want to know more information about the fee waiver process, you can also just email us directly at cds-admissions@nyu.edu, and we will provide you the information about how to apply for this. We accept requests from all applicants, international or domestic. There is no restriction with regards to that. But again, we do emphasize that it is a limited application, so not all applicants that request one will receive one. So just please keep that in mind. The application deadline is December 4th of this year, 2005, by 5 p.m. Eastern. We do not accept late applications. There also is not a priority deadline. So applications are reviewed only after the deadline has passed. There is no like rolling admissions or anything of that sort. So if you apply earlier, that's perfectly fine, but your application won't be reviewed until after the deadline. So you won't receive any updates until after that. We do not conduct any pre-application reviews. So I know folks are sometimes curious about whether their academic profile is suitable for applying for the program. But unfortunately, we do have to be mindful of like any potential bias with the admissions review process. So we cannot give any like personalized advice to applicants. But as we mentioned, we have discussed throughout the session, there are, particular like expectations that we have of applicants, so we can clarify those aspects for you. So just one thing that we want to highlight there. All submitted applications, as I mentioned before, reviewed after the deadline, and decisions will be available in February. And then the PhD program is only available for fall admission, so there is not an option to apply for spring. Okay, so that is the end of our presentation today. So we thank you for joining us. Again, we have some links here to our web pages that have all the detailed information about the application and admissions processes. You can always email us directly to provide any clarification to questions that you may have. And now I think let's see if there's any questions that maybe require some more clarification here. Let's see. So someone is asking if their TOEFL score is below the mark, or if it's about to expire. I think with regards to expiration, there is no exception with regards to that. So you do need to make sure that your exam results have not expired by the time you're applying. If not, you would have to retake it and resubmit. If it's below the score, again, it's a recommended minimum score that we have, so not required, but it could affect your application because that is an important component. So that is something to keep in mind as well. Is there an interview component to the admissions process? Yes, there is. Okay, so a question about funding here. So as we mentioned earlier, the program is fully funded. So applicants are not required to find outside funding prior to applying. So this is a commitment that is provided to admitted students. See, I think one of these have been answered already. With regards to visa status, there aren't any particular advantages for types of visas that you may have. And then in terms of advisors, so when you are submitting your application, there are options to select the specific domains that you are interested in. And then once you select the domain, the relevant faculty will pop up after that. So then you can select the faculty that you're interested in working with. But we do encourage you to be as specific as possible. Don't just like select everyone on there because that wouldn't really demonstrate what your particular interests are. So it's important to really narrow down what you are particularly hoping to pursue with your research, and then determine whether a faculty's background and research aligns with your own.
Recommendation letters.
Yes, letters of recommendation. So when you're in the application portal, you will see the process there requires you to list your recommenders and their contact information, their email address. And so then the portal will send a link to the recommenders to submit on their own. So applicants are not submitting those on their own. It would be the recommender themselves. Working with associated professors. So there is a specific faculty list of faculty that are part of the PhD advisory group. So you can review that page, and then that will demonstrate who is eligible for advising. But there are opportunities to work with other faculty outside of that.
Maybe I can clarify. So the way it works is that you need one of your advisors to be part of this advisors pool that is listed on the webpage, but you can have a co-advisors among the affiliated faculty, and that might be the person that you're primarily working with. But you always need an advisor within the core faculty.
Okay. About the letterheads, yes, as I mentioned earlier, it's not a requirement. We just highly recommend them, but it's not a requirement. A master's degree within the PhD. So there is not a master's of science that PhD students are receiving after their second year. Students receive an MPhil after completing certain milestones, but there is no MS that is granted after a second year. Okay. I think questions are slowing down here. Some of these are repeated ones, so we won't repeat the answers again, but if you have, again, any clarifying questions, you are welcome to reach out to us directly. And we are happy to provide more detailed responses. Okay, so I think that we'll call it here. We can stop the recording. Catherine.